The New York Times has published a behind-the-scenes story of how the United States Supreme Court eliminated the 50-year-old constitutional right to an abortion. In the wake of Justice Samuel Alito's leaked draft opinion, the Times reveals that Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Stephen Breyer, quote, worked to prevent or at least limit the outcome. Justice Breyer even considered trying to save Roe v. Wade by significantly eroding it if they could just win Justice Kavanaugh over. Justice Breyer even contemplated joining him and the chief in a 15-week position, according to people familiar with his thinking. The identity and motive of the person who disclosed it remains unknown, but the effect of the breach is clear. It helped lock in the result, undercutting Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Breyer's quest to find a middle ground. At the time of the leak, Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz wrote, quote, "This is nothing short of a massive victory." What Ted Cruz saw as a massive victory changed the lives of millions of Americans, including pregnant mom Kate Cox, who was denied an abortion by Texas' Supreme Court after she learned of her fetus's fatal condition. Kate Cox has since left the state of Texas to end her pregnancy. Her story is forcing Texas lawmakers to face the dangerous consequences of their state's draconian abortion ban. And while Ted Cruz isn't shy about discussing how he feels about the Supreme Court's decision, he refuses to weigh in on his own constituent.
Senator, are you supportive of the Texas Supreme Court's ruling in the Kate Cox case that prevented her from getting an abortion after she learned her fetus was not viable?
Just call her press office.
I actually have for 2 days now, and I still haven't received an answer.
Thank you.
Running away, Ted Cruz. Joining us now is Jessica Mackler, the interim president at Emily's List, one of the nation's largest resources dedicated to electing Democratic pro-choice women to office. Jessica, I know that you read this piece. I read it over and over again, and each time I read it, I got more progressively angry and disgusted. You know, voting is one option for us, right? I get it, Jessica, and I know we're going to talk about that, but this piece just underscored exactly how opaque, how much of a black box the Supreme Court is. Because after the leak of the Dobbs decision, the court released its decision with very slight changes. I mean, doesn't it seem like the fix was in from the beginning then?
Well, Katie, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. There's so much to discuss on this topic. And, you know, what really stood out to me in this very extensive reporting is it seems clear that some justices were so intent on overturning Roe that they were willing to do away with their own precedent, their own guidelines. And honestly, it's not really very surprising. Conservatives have shown us that they would do anything to overturn Roe. And it didn't matter what they said in their confirmation hearings or what sort of, internal dialogues were happening, what elected Republicans say on the campaign trail. Whatever it is that they're saying, their aims are really clear here. This is who they are. In 2016, it was Donald Trump who said he was going to appoint justices who would overturn Roe. And that's exactly what he did. And so when people show us who we are, we have to believe them and show voters who they are. And that's exactly what we've been doing, but we're going to do going forward because it's infuriating.
I want to highlight something quickly from this piece. You know, I'm not a fan of Justice Thomas or his wife, Ginny. And then I read this, that Justice Thomas and his wife hold a gathering for former clerks and their families. And then the lawyer who basically led the charge in the Dobbs case to get Roe overturned shows up. And he's shown up to reunions in previous years because he worked for the justice from 2015 to 2016. I mean, it's insidious. It's incestuous. It's disgusting that there really are no checks and balances in place at the highest court of the land to make sure that this doesn't happen. So what's the solution from your viewpoint, Jessica? How are changes made to protect Americans? I'm not just talking about the ethics over in SCOTUS. I'm talking about how do we create more safeguards to protect Americans so that stuff like this doesn't happen?
Well, look, I think what we have to do is we have to take this fight at every level that it comes to us and that we can fight it, and we have to win, and we have been doing that. And what is encouraging is that in every election since the Dobbs decision, we have seen voters stand up and say that they believe that these rights are rights that we should hold, that these are decisions that should be made. They're very personal, that they shouldn't involve politicians or justices or bureaucrats. And so we know that voters are on our side. We know that voters believe that Democrats will stand up for these rights and that Republicans are there to take them away. And so we're going to have to win this at the ballot box. And, we know that also the federal threat of a federal abortion ban is real. And so we need to we're going to need federal legislation. And so we need to take back the House and hold the Senate in order to get that done.
Jessica, I got less than a minute, but I did want to ask, you've been intimately involved in voting rights. You've been intimately involved in making sure that people understand the power of the vote and the power of the ballot. Has there ever been a time that has been so critical in terms of people being aware that there are consequences to how they vote, to who becomes not only the president, but the senators and your congressional reps, stuff like that?
We often say this is the most important election, but this really is. The mission has never been more critical. This devastating case in Texas is the perfect example, unfortunately, of the consequences of this anti-abortion agenda. And, Ted Cruz, you showed him trying to run away. He can run, but he cannot hide from the fact that this is a direct result of the actions that he and other anti-abortion politicians have taken. And so, no, there has never been a time that is more important for voters to be tuned in. And we're going to make sure that we make this contrast really clear for them, that they understand what Republicans are trying to do. And we know that when they see that, they are going to reject that.